ね、立ったの？
いや、どうぞお座りになってください。こちらをお願いします。ありがとうございます。
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan for today's press conference. Before I begin the introduction, can I just ask everyone to make sure you've done what I've just done and turned off your cell phone or mute it? Thank you very much. Japan has what has been termed by some a unique constitution. The topic of our press conference today, also in that it was drawn up by an occupying force. This constitution, which is now 70 years old, of course, holds a war-renouncing element to it. One might say that Japan's constitution, whoever it was authored by, has actually worked. In that Japan and its people have lived in peace for the 70 years since the end of the Second World War. However, time and circumstances haven't stood still. We see a very clear threat, a military threat from North Korea, the also rise of China, both as an economy and as a military force in Asia. Hence, many voices have been calling for Japan to change the constitution, particularly the war-renouncing rights. Of course, this is very controversial, hence the reason why it's been on the front page of many newspapers and TV programs of late. So we are very fortunate today, excuse me, in that we have former Justice Minister Okiharu Yasuoka, who actually heads the LDP's panel on constitutional reform and will be talking to us today about this specific issues and some others to do with government policy. So if I could just ask you again to give a very warm welcome for our speaker today. Thank you.
皆さんこんにちは。
Good afternoon, everybody.
今日は伝統あるですね、日本外国特派員協会お招きいただきまして、こうやって皆さんとお話しする機会を得まして大変光栄に思っております。
I am very honored for the opportunity to be invited here to speak with you all at the FCCJ, which of course holds great tradition.
なんか世界一古くて最も権威のある記者クラブということで、1945年の、太平洋戦争が終わった時にですね、世界から集まったジャーナリストや写真家が作った、特派員クラブだということで、日本の戦後の歴史と一緒なんだなとそう思った次第でございます。
I've heard that this club is one of the oldest and really has great authority within foreign press clubs from around the world as well, that it was created or formed by journalists and photographers from around the world who came together at the time of the end of World War II. So I believe it could be said that the FCCJ has really walked together or come together with the post-war history of Japan in these decades.
今お話があった通り、その日本が第二次世界大戦で敗れた後、連合国が日本を占領したんですね。その時にマッカーサーの指示で、本当はハーグ条約上は占領下においてその国の基本的な法制を変えてはならないと、こういう趣旨の条約があったと思うんですけども、連合国マッカーサー司令官はですね、上手に日本が再びなんていうか 世界の秩序を乱す脅威にならないように、二度と戦争で立ち上がらないようにという、そういう日本のある意味無力化をですね、前提として、この憲法を作ったという経緯があると思います。
And if we look at this post-war history of Japan, at the end of World War II, when Japan lost the war and was occupied by the Allied forces, we could see that under the Hague Convention and so on, usually under the occupation, the basic laws of the country and so on would be altered to fit this situation of occupation. At that time, the Allies, led by Mr. MacArthur, made steps to, in a sense, remove the power of Japan to ensure that it would not once again make war in the region or disturb the order of the region.
先の大戦で日本は本当に大きな痛手を受けまして、多くの方が亡くなったり、また外国の戦争に巻き込んだ国々の方にも、大変な被害を与える結果になって、非常に日本国民はですね、もともと和の国ですから平和を愛する国家だったんですけども、明治以降ですね、列強にごすと言って富国強兵といって兵隊も強くということで列強に負けない体制を取るのに一生懸命なったあまりですね、敗戦してしまったわけです。
During the war of the World War II, there were, of course, many lives lost on the Japanese side. There was great sacrifice in Japan as well. Not only this, but those other countries which were embroiled into the war, and Japan caused the loss of lives in many of these places as well. The Japanese people traditionally, however, are very much based on the concept of wa, or harmony, and are a peace-loving people. However, since the Meiji era and the time when the military was strengthened in order to create a stronger country as well, unfortunately, this perhaps went to the stage of, what led to the war and then the subsequent loss in the war also.
日本人はですから、戦争大嫌いな国家に大きく変わりました。今日まで日本国憲法が、改正されなかった最大の理由は、憲法の9条、戦争放棄の条項ですね。これを国民が大事にした結果だと思います。
And the Japanese people, as a result, are very much a people who despise war. They became a people who did not want or desire any kind of war. The biggest reason that throughout all of these years the Japanese constitution was not changed is because particularly Article 9 of the constitution, which is the clause which abandons war or gives up war within the constitution, the fact that the people of Japan highly valued this aspect of the constitution is what led for it to be preserved for all of these years.
自民党は1955年決闘しましたが、決闘の時の理念は、日本国憲法を自主的に改正すると、独立した新しい日本の憲法を自分たちで、国情に合わせて作り直すということを党是としました。
The Liberal Democratic Party was established or formed in the year 1955, and from that very time, the LDP has held as one of its primary principles to amend the constitution, to create an independent constitution, a new constitution by Japan, and in an independent way as well, to adapt to the situation. This has been a consistent policy of the LDP since its formation.
いろいろ経緯はあるんですけども、今日はここでその話をするわけではありませんので、その後日本は経済中心にですね、政治を行いまして、憲法改正は国会で議論すらできない状況で推移しまして、東西冷戦構造が崩壊して、その後2000年になってやっと憲法を国会で論ずる組織が衆参に憲法調査会として立ち上がったわけです。
And for various reasons and background factors, which I will not go into detail today, but the Japanese politics continued with economic issues at the center. It was not possible during much of this time for debate about constitutional amendment to take place in the Diet. However, following the collapse of the Cold War structures and coming into the year 2000 or the 2000s, it finally became a situation where constitutional amendment could be debated at the Diet level, and within both houses of the Diet, a research commission or commission on the Constitution was created in regards to this.
平成2000年から 今日まで17年余りですね、国会で憲法の改正、憲法の問題を調査したり議論したりしてまいりましたし、かなりですね、しっかりした憲法論議は我々進めてきたと思っております。
And since the year 2000, some 17 years have passed in that time, and I believe that during this period, there has been rather thorough research and debate on the issue of constitutional amendment at the Diet level.
両院で議長報告を5年間でまとめて、その後2年余りかけて、国民投票法制を作り、そして18歳投票年齢という憲法を発議できる条件を全部整えました。
And so after this time, following the construction of the Research Commission on the Constitution in both houses, 5 years were spent to come up with a report during this time. And then following this, around 2 years from the time from there, the law regarding national referendum was created as a result, and also looking at the issue of lowering the age of voting and also being able to propose bills to the age of 18. This was all a result of this process of debate.
残念なことに政局に巻き込まれて与野党が対決するということになると、憲法改正論議はなかなか進まないということで、そうですね、合わせて6年7年ぐらい憲法の論議が国会で止まっていた時期もございます。
However, unfortunately, due to various conflicts or differences of opinion divides within the parties as well, there was a period where discussion on constitutional amendment could not go forward. There was a period of around 6 to 7 years where it almost came to a stop at the Diet.
近いところでは去年の秋から憲法審査会が両院で始まりまして、そして今年に入ってもなんとかですね、いろいろ政局の波をくぐりながら憲法論議を進めてまいりました。
However, finally, in the fall of last year, the commissions on the Constitution in both of the houses of the Diet were able to launch their discussions, and somehow overcoming or going with the various waves within the political situation, the debate has been able to progress during this time.
そういう時にですね、我々としても憲法論議を抽象的にしてても、憲法改正というのは最終的に国民投票で決めるものですから、したがってそろそろ憲法のどこをどのように具体的に変えるか、その改正の必要性は何か、そういったことを案文の形で明確にして国民の前に国会で論議したり党で論議したりする時代を迎えていると、こう思っておりました。
And we believe that when we consider that the constitutional debate, of course, will be finally, or the decision will be made by the people of Japan through a national referendum, it is now the time not to be having abstract discussions or debate in regard to constitutional amendment. Rather, we have now reached the stage where it is necessary to talk about what exactly should be amended, should be changed in the Constitution, in what way, and what kind of concrete changes are needed. Also, why this is necessary now. We believe that it's now the time to make a clear proposal and discuss this within the Diet and also in front of the people of Japan in order to bring this debate forward.
そういう時にちょうどというかタイミングよく安倍総裁がですね、自民党総裁が5月3日の憲法施行70周年記念の日に、全国民そして党員にメッセージを発せられました。
And in somewhat of what we could refer to as good timing, the president of the Liberal Democratic Party, Mr. Abe, on May the 3rd, which is the constitutional anniversary in Japan, sent forward a message to the people of Japan and also the members of the LDP.
それは9条の条文はそのまま残して自衛隊の存在だけは明記する、こういう憲法改正案はどうだろうかという発言でございました。
And the message which he stated at this time was the proposal or the suggestion to maintain the current parts of Article 9 of the Japanese Constitution, the current 2 paragraphs, and to add onto this a statement which would clearly set out the existence of the self-defense forces.
そしてもう一つは経済的な事情に左右されずに希望すれば高等教育をはじめですね、教育が国民に開かれたものである いうそういう憲法改正を目指そうという提案でした。
And one further suggestion which was made by Mr. Abe at this time regarding the contents of the constitutional amendment was something, well, if the economic situation would allow, looking at the concept of making education open and accessible to all people of Japan, to look at making higher education available for free. This was also a proposal within the amendments.
先ほど申し上げたように、日本は平和愛国国の道を70年歩んできました。どうぞ。
As I mentioned, Japan has continued on the path of a peaceful country for the past 70 years.
2年前、終戦70周年記念の日に、安倍総理大臣は閣議決定で総理大臣談話を発表しています。
2 years ago, on the anniversary of the end of World War II, the 70th anniversary, Prime Minister Abe, through a cabinet decision, made a prime ministerial statement on that occasion.
それは安倍総裁が日本政府のトップとしてですね、戦前の戦争に至った経緯を痛く反省して、日本は二度と武力行使によって国の主張をしない国家として生まれ変わって今日まで歩んできたと。
And within this statement, as president of the LDP, Mr. Abe, as the top of the Japanese government, also expressed deep regret for the nature of pre-war Japan, and also expressed that Japan has become a country which would never again express or go ahead through the use of force.
そしてこれからも子や孫にそういう国家を受け継いでいくんだと、それを固く誓った国家だということを表明したのでございます。
And he also pledged at this time to maintain Japan as such a country for the future generations, to pass on to the future generations also.
まあ憲法の解釈はいろいろ変遷がございますが、最初は自衛権まで放棄したという当時の吉田総理の答弁もあります。しかしその後、自衛のための必要最小限度のその自衛の組織は持つということで、今日自衛隊が存在しています。
There are, of course, various interpretations of the Constitution, and there has been changes in the interpretation along or throughout the years as well. However, when we consider looking at the right to self-defense from the time of Mr. Yoshida, we have seen that it is now, or the current status of Japan is recognizing, maintaining an organization, shall we say, as that is at the least needed for protecting or for self-defense of Japan, and that is, of course, the self-defense forces.
簡単に言えば、我が国を防衛するために必要最小限度の実力組織としての自衛隊は憲法も認めている合憲だという解釈に今日なっております。
And so to put this simply, the current or the existing interpretation of the Constitution recognizes that the existence of the self-defense forces is indeed constitutional as an organization which maintains the amount of force required to defend Japan.
2年前に成立した平和安全法制もこの原則の範囲内に立っています。
And the peace and security bills which were passed 2 years ago are also consistent with this interpretation.
ところが学者の中には、憲法学者の中には自衛隊は違憲である、あるいはそういう指摘が多いもんですから、教科書などにもですね、違憲の指摘があるということがですね、どの教科書にも普通書かれています。
However, there are many voices within constitutional scholars or also other people who say that the existence of the self-defense forces does indeed go against the Constitution, and this is also listed, for example, in certain textbooks and so on.
日本の平和愛国国の象徴である自衛隊の存在、これを守ってくれているツールといったら語弊があるかもしれませんけども、手段である自衛の組織、これが合憲違憲の評価が分かれると、解釈が分かれるということはいかがなものかと。そしてまた、自衛隊の諸君が命を懸けて国を守り、 災害にあたっては救助に赴き、世界の平和活動には積極的に努力をして、世界から評価を受けているにもかかわらず、それが違憲な存在だということがあるということ自体が異常であると。自衛隊が憲法に明文として合憲の存在として書かれてないことが異常である。したがってこの際、安倍さんは自衛隊という一番大事な国家の組織、基本的な国防という一番国政上重要なテーマを担っている自衛隊を明確に憲法に合憲として位置づける、それだけでも良い、その改正をしたいという提案で、憲法の解釈には9条、いろいろな解釈が存在します。もちろん政府解釈もあります。しかし、そういったものには一切触れずに、それはそのまま残して、自衛隊が違憲であるという議論の余地をなくしてしまおうと。自衛隊は合憲だと、誰から見ても合憲だという改正をしようという提案をされたと理解しました。
And the existence of the self-defense forces, which is, of course, a symbolic organization which has preserved the peace of Japan over these years, it could be said to be a tool or a method which has protected Japan over these years. The fact that there is discussion at all about whether they are indeed permitted according to the Constitution or they are anti or against the Constitution, the fact that there is this difference or this discussion is something in itself which is not a good situation. The self-defense force members themselves are putting their lives on the line to protect Japan. They are also active in aid and support activities in the times of disaster. They are also active in peacekeeping operations, which are highly praised by other members of the international community as well. However, the fact that there are claims or voices which say that the self-defense force themselves are actually against the Constitution itself is a very unusual situation, a very extreme situation. And it is for this reason that Mr. Abe has suggested that the self-defense forces as one of the most important organizations, which is a really fundamental organization within Japan as a country, should be clearly included within the Constitution and positioned within the Constitution. So while there are, of course, various different interpretations in regards to Article 9 of the Constitution, the government also has its interpretation. The current or the recent suggestion from Mr. Abe is looking at, or putting these different discussions or these different interpretations aside and being able to just incorporate language which clearly sets out the existence of the self-defense force as an organization which is included within the Constitution. That would be able to rid the situation of any questioning about the existence of the self-defense forces themselves, and something which would be accepted by all.
この提案ならば、国会の3分の2以上の議員の賛成が得られる可能性が非常にあり、そして国民投票から言っても9割以上の国民が自衛隊を信頼して尊敬している。これは第1回目の一番重要な9条の改正としては誠に成功を得ている。私はそのように感じました。
And such a suggestion or a proposal is also something which would be very likely to be able to obtain a 2/3 plus majority within the Diet. Also, it is said that some 90% of the people of Japan also do trust or respect the self-defense forces as well. Therefore, looking at this as the most important aspect within the amendment or change to Article 9, I feel that this would be a rather pragmatic way to go forward.
以上がですね、9条に関する安倍総裁の会見発言に対するとりあえずの私の説明にしたいと思います。
And so until now, or this has been my explanation of LDP President Abe's suggestion in regards to a constitutional amendment.
いずれにしてもこれはこれから自民党憲法改正推進本部で我が党で議論を活発にしてですね、そして具体的な案を作っていくわけで、現在私の受け止め方ということでご理解いただければと思います。
And of course, from now, the discussion or debate within the Liberal Democratic Party, and particularly within the Constitutional Reform Promotion headquarters, will take place from now. And this will lead to a concrete proposal in regards to this suggested amendment as well. So I would like to just share today with you my overall sense in regards to this issue.
それと教育の無償化の問題ですが、これは戦後間もない憲法を作った当時、26条で義務教育を無償化したわけです。これがやはり日本のですね、戦後の教育の大きな基礎になった。あんな貧しい時代、財源もない時代に義務教育を無償化したことは、この憲法の一つの誇りだと思います。
And the second issue relating to education and making higher education available for free. If we look at the time or the post-war era of Japan, even since immediately after the war when the constitution was created, at that time, of course, Japan was in a very poor economic state. It did not have many resources. However, through Article 26 of the constitution, it set forth that compulsory education would be made available for free. And this really formed the basis for the Japanese education from there as well. This is something of which we should be proud.
そして現在、日本で一番トップにあると思われる東京大学が世界の大学ランクで34位です。
However, now what is considered as the top university in Japan, the University of Tokyo, is at an international ranking of the 34th place.
これはやはり日本人の能力が低いというよりかですね、むしろ教育に対する的確な投資が行われていない結果ではないかと思います。
And I do not believe that this is an indicator of a low capacity or a low level of people in Japan. Rather, this is an indicator of insufficient investment being made into education in Japan.
社会の格差をなくして貧困の連鎖を断ち切る。このためにもですね、幼児教育の無償化を中心に、高等教育においても希望すれば誰でもどういう経済状況にある子どもたちでもみんなが高等教育を受けられる環境を作ることはとても重要なテーマです。
And so looking at how to deal with issues of disparity or economic gaps within society and also how to break the chain of poverty, I believe that looking at from the early childhood education level through to higher education, making this available for anyone no matter their economic circumstances is a topic of great importance.
この26条の見直しについてもですね、総理から提言があっているわけですが、これもやはり議論の仕様によっては、案文の作り方によっては、国会で発議し、国民投票で2分の1を得る可能性のあるテーマの一つです。
And Prime Minister Abe has also made a proposal of suggestions regarding Article 26 of the Constitution in relation to education. Of course, this will depend on how the debate or the discussion is formed within the Diet and the people from now. But we do believe that this is also an issue which would be able to obtain a 2/3 plus majority within the Diet and also on the level of a national referendum.
私たち憲法改正推進本部はその他に緊急事態条項、それから、合区や投票の一票の格差の問題、こういったこともテーマに挙げています。日本はヨーロッパの先進諸国に比べたら150倍ぐらい全盛期に自然災害等のリスクを受けたと言われてますし、アメリカの10倍、15倍ぐらいですね、100倍かな、ヨーロッパの100倍、アメリカの15倍ぐらい、アメリカ大陸の15倍ぐらい、いろいろ災害リスクにさらされたと言われている。したがって緊急事態条項を整備する。例えばそういう時に立法が機能しなければ緊急政令の必要がないか、あるいは国会議員の選挙中であれば、衆議院の解散中であれば、衆議院が一人もいない状況をしばらく選挙が実施できるまでは経過しなければならない。国難にあたってそれで国民主権が全うされるものか、こういった課題です。
Some of the other issues which within the LDP Constitutional Reform Promotion Headquarters we are raising as topics for discussion amongst the issue of constitutional amendment include, first of all, the inclusion of a clause regarding emergency situations in the country. Also looking at the issue of merging electorates, looking at the difference, for example, between how much one vote can count for according to the electorate and so on. On the issue of emergency situations, if we compare Japan to the industrialized countries of Europe, for example, Japan has faced around 100 times the risk of natural disasters than countries of Europe. If we compare to the American continent, also we can see that Japan is around 15 times as many natural disasters in comparison as well. Therefore, this really indicates the importance of inclusion of a clause regarding emergency situations. Also, when we consider, for example, in such a circumstance, if legislation were, or the legislative functions would fail to be operating, or also, for example, if this were to take place during a time when the Diet is not in session or when it is an election time, as so on, looking at the situation of how to deal with such a circumstances, show that these are also key issues to be discussed within the topic of constitutional reform.
それと選挙の時の一票の格差の問題と合区のことは、これは人口が首都圏にものすごく日本の場合集中していて、どんどん地方の人口が減って首都圏を中心とするところの人口がどんどん増える。この人口偏在がですね、議員の数をで見ると一票を全く同質として整えたらですね、地方はどんどん議員の数が少なくなる。首都圏を中心に都会はどんどん議員の数が増える。選挙区はどんどん地方は広くなり、中央ではどんどんちっちゃくなって、そこにたくさんの選挙区ができて、たくさんの議員が存在する。これが政治プロセスの健全な姿かというテーマです。
And in regards to the electoral system or the election system issues as well, if we look at, for example, the difference in value of how much one vote counts for, or the issue of merging of electorates, this is also a key issue for Japanese politics. We see the situation where the population of Japan is very much being concentrated, particularly in the capital area, the metropolitan area, and the population in regional or countryside areas of Japan is decreasing. This also, of course, has an impact on the number of Diet members who are appointed to each of these areas. How to bring this into light and ensure that there is an equal system is indeed a question here. When we see, for example, the population in regional areas is becoming less and less, this also means that they have less Diet members representing them. It also means that the size of their electorates is also growing larger and larger. However, at the same time, urban areas, and particularly the capital of Japan, are having more and more Diet members appointed to represent them, and also the electorates are becoming smaller and more, well, detailed, shall we say, as well. This is also an issue of particular importance for the politics of Japan.
同じ選挙区であなたは1票、あなたは2票っていうのは誰が考えてもおかしい。これが憲法に書いてある法の下の平等なんですね。ところが先ほど申し上げたように地方の議員がどんどん少なくなる。広い面積で1人が担当する。選挙区で初めて活動をして信頼を得て当選する。建前は国会議員は全国民を代表する存在ですけれども、実際に選挙で当選したり、そこの課題をしっかり捉えて全国の課題を考えたり解決したりする、そういう基盤があるんで、そういったものが例えば日本列島の地図をこう書いて議員の数でそれを修正したら、九州の私のあたりは本当にちっちゃくなっちゃう。北海道もあんな広いところなのにちっちゃくなっちゃう。で首都圏だけお腹がでっかくてメタボの極端なですね、不健康な体に見える。それと全く同じで、政治のプロセスの機会均等というものはそういう点も考慮して憲法に原則を新しく求めていく必要がないかというテーマです。
And therefore, if we consider the situation where one person can be said, well, okay, you have one vote, whereas another person is told, well, you have two, then this is, of course, an absurd situation. If we look at, as enshrined in the Constitution, being equal under law, this is a concept that we need to keep in mind. However, if we consider the fact that regional areas are having less and less Diet members able to represent them, and one Diet member is being responsible for a very broad, a very wide area, of course, this is an issue of concern. People are only elected to become Diet members when, of course, they have their foundation of trust in the local area as well. And it is based on this local trust and being able to deal with local challenges that they are able in the national Diet to also deal with the resolution of issues on the national level as well. If we were, for example, to adjust a map of the Japanese archipelago according to the size of the electorates or the number of Diet members and so on, we would see that, for example, Kyushu, where I am from, would be very, very small on this map. Also the same for Hokkaido, despite the fact that it has a very large land mass. On such a map, it would also be represented only very small. However, if we were to look at Tokyo or the metropolitan area on such a map, for example, it would be huge. It would be as if it had, metabolic syndrome, shall we say. So if we look at the issue of equality of opportunities under the political process, ensuring that this can be included within the Constitution is also a key factor of our proposal for reform.
今までの議論からすれば、例えば憲法改正のテーマ、知る権利とか、それから環境権とか、あるいは犯罪被害者の権利とか、知的財産条項とか、他にもいろいろ改憲テーマは議論してまいりました。しかし1回の国民投票で投票できる上昇の数というのは各事項ごとに投票しますので、3つかぐらいかなということを考えると、そういったその他のテーマ、あるいは野党からも具体的な提案がある、そういったものをどういう形で最終的に整理されて国会で発議されていくか、これからの流れの中で決まっていきます。
And of course, there are many other issues which have been raised amongst the debate regarding constitutional amendment from now as well, looking at issues, for example, related to the right to know, environmental rights, the rights of victims of crime, intellectual property, and so on as well. However, if we consider the number of issues or the number of points in constitutional reform which could be voted upon in one single referendum, of course this is limited. I would say that perhaps 3 points would be the maximum which could be included in one single referendum or discussion in regards to this. From now, of course, there will need to be discussion on other proposals regarding these aforementioned issues, and also some of the proposals put forward by opposition parties. But how to gather or manage these and put these forward in the Diet will be a question to be dealt with from now.
非常に大きく捉えて大まかな話になりましたけども、あとは具体的な皆さんのご関心、ご質問に答えていきたいと思いますので、以上で私からのお話は終わりにしたいと思います。
So this has been perhaps what is a very large or general discussion in relation to these points. From now, I would like to end my presentation here and go on to discussion or questions regarding the points of your interest. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Yasuoka. We have only 20 minutes or just over for questions, as Mr. Yasuoka has another appointment to get to at 4:30 sharp. So Linda is first. If you can give your name and affiliation and keep your questions brief, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Linda Sieg from Reuters. The Prime Minister has said that he would like to see the Constitution, Article 9, revised by 2020. Now, realistically, clearly this needs to take place where in a situation where 2/3 of the members of each House of Parliament will agree to pass the resolution ahead of the public referendum. Realistically speaking, that would seem to imply that the resolution should be done before the next lower house election, in case those in favor of reform do not maintain the 2/3 majority. Do you think that this schedule timeline is realistic, is achievable, practical? And do you think that the recent decline in the Abe administration's support rate for unrelated reasons primarily, would have any effect on the timing or the debate on constitutional revision? Thank you.
2つほど質問なんですけれど、まず1つ目は総理が、憲法9条の改正を2020年までにしたいというふうに発言されているんですけれども、それをするためにはやはり両院での3分の2、そして国民投票という非常にプロセスとしてもそのスケジュール的にそれは実現可能というふうに思われますでしょうか。例えば次の衆議院選の前にそれをやらなければいけないということになるかもしれないんですけれども、そのスケジュールというのは実現可能というふうに思われますでしょうか。そして2つ目の方なんですけれども、安倍政権の支持率が最近別の理由で下がっているという報道もあるんですけれども、それはこういったようなそのスケジュール、そしてタイミングの方に影響があるというふうに思われますでしょうか。
はい、端的にお答えすればですね、その可能性はあると思っております。
To respond simply, I do believe that it is possible.
私の立場ではやはり来年の通常国会が終わるまでに、憲法改正ができれば一番ベストだと思いますが、それはおっしゃるように、与野党の協議や、そして順調に発議ができるか、国民投票も60日ないし180日の期間を要するわけですから、そう簡単なことではないと思っております。でも私の立場からすればですね、全力を挙げてできるだけ早く憲法改正の発議、国民投票に到達できるように頑張る強い意志を持っております。
And so from my position, I believe that it would be best if we are able to achieve amendment of the Constitution by the end of next year's regular session of the Diet. As you say, of course, there will be a need for discussion with the opposition parties as well, the need for this to be put forward in the Diet, and the necessary number of days for the national referendum. This is, of course, not an easy process. However, from my position, my stance, and with the determination of committing to putting all efforts into this process to put this forward as soon as possible, I do believe that it is possible, and I'm determined to do all I can to achieve this.
政局のトラブルさえなければ、私は非常に具体的な案として明確になればなるほど、国民が理解をして、そういう憲法改正なら早くやったらどうかという空気が広がると、そう思っております。
And I believe that if all does go according to or without hitch, if such concrete proposals for the amendments can be put forward, this will be a way to gain the understanding of the people of Japan. And people will see, oh, well, if this is the kind of change, this is the kind of amendment that is being suggested with, then we should go ahead with this swiftly. I believe that the kind of atmosphere which can enable this can be created.
Yeah. So.
Süddeutsche Zeitung Neidhardt. A few years ago, the LDP circulated a draft for a new constitution that actually denied women equal rights. Question: are you working on the basis of that draft, or is this totally separate? And how do you how's your position about that old draft?
数年前に自民党が新しい憲法の草案を出したと思うんですけれども、その法案の中で例えば女性の権利というところが、
女性の権利、
そうですね、女性の権利がそれでなくなるというようなことがあったというふうに聞いてるんですけれども、今のご提案というのはその数年前の草案に基づいているものでしょうか、それともまた完全に新しいものでしょうか、その草案との関係について教えてください。
自民党は結党以来いろいろな提言や考え方をまとめてきていますが、特に2005年のとそれから2012年に憲法典という形で憲法全体の改正の姿を示しています。しかし今回の改正ではもちろんそれは参考にして基礎にはしますけども、今の段階では具体的に3分の2の多数を国会で形成ができて、発議ができて、国民投票の過半数を得られる、すなわち自民党だけじゃなくて他の政党に幅広い3分の2の合意形成ができる可能性を求めて動き出しておりますので、従来作った我々の憲法草案にこだわるものではありません。
The LDP, since its foundation, has put forward various proposals in regards to the Constitution of Japan. Particularly, there were the two concrete drafts of the amendment overall for the Constitution, which were put forward in 2005 and then more recently in 2012. Of course, these two drafts are being referenced in regards to the current proposal being made, and this is being held somewhat as a base. However, at this stage, we are looking at how to achieve the at least two-thirds majority at the level of the Diet and also majority in the national referendum as well. And also being able to achieve this majority not only from the LDP, but also with the broader support from other political parties as well. Therefore, we are not strictly sticking to the previous drafts in this respect.
Elizabeth and Jake.
Isabel Reynolds from Bloomberg. I'd like to ask about Article 9. Mr. Ishiba from your party has pointed out that if you keep both current paragraphs of Article 9 and add a third one, that it would end up in a kind of contradiction, saying that you won't have land, sea and air forces, and yet you will. And the other point is about collective self-defense. At the moment, Japan has allowed itself limited collective self-defense. If you lay out the self-defense forces as constitutional, will that give you unlimited rights to collective self-defense?
ブルームバーグの記者です。2つほど質問なんですけれども、憲法9条についての質問です。まず石破さんが最近その憲法9条の1と2項をそのまま維持して、それで新しいものを加えるということも、ある意味で矛盾しているというふうに発言されていると思うんですけれども、それについてのコメントをお願いします。その保持しないと言いながら自衛隊そのを保持するというような矛盾ということについてです。そして2つ目の方なんですけれども、集団的自衛権についての質問なんですけれども、今の憲法解釈ではその限られた集団的自衛権が認められているというふうに思うんですけれども、自衛隊の存在が憲法の中で明記された場合に、それをその制限のない形で集団的自衛権のが許可されるということになりますでしょうか。
はい、第一の質問ですけれども、今の9条それ自体がですね、文字通り、読みますとね、いわば分離解釈を厳格にすると自衛権も放棄したみたいな内容になっています。特に2項には陸海空軍その他の戦力はこれを保持しないと、国の構成権はこれを認めないとなっている。これは要するに自衛隊は陸海空軍ではないと、戦力ではないと、自衛隊には交戦権がないと、こう言ってるのと等しいわけです。ですから今の解釈自体にもその矛盾としない政府見解はありますけれども、一見矛盾しています。でその解釈はそのまま残さざるを得ません。石破さんはこの際新しい9条の改正でそれも解決したいという強い希望を持っておられますが、それを石破さんの考え方を入れて改正案をまとめるとすれば、まず有党の公明党は絶対に合意形成に参加しないでしょう。そうすると最初から3分の2の形成が難しい案ということになるので、それを諦めて自衛隊の解釈だけは、これはどんな人でも合憲と言わざるを得ない解釈にとどめると。他の解釈は今までの政府解釈やいろんな解釈が世の中に存在するけれども、それに決着をつけるものではない、そういうことだと思います。集団的自衛権についてどうぞ。
So first of all, in regards to the first part of your question or the text of Article 9 itself, it is of course looking at renouncing war and renouncing the threat or use of force. If we read, for example, by word, the second part of Article 9, which refers to the fact that land, sea, and air forces, as well as other war potential, will never be maintained, and the right of belligerency of the state will not be recognized. If we look at this is, under the current interpretation, saying that the self-defense forces are not defined as forces, and they do not have the right of belligerency within the current interpretation. However, well, of course, the current government interpretation does not hold the existence of the self-defense forces to be contradictory to the current constitution. If we consider, in a sense, this is already does maintain or does have some kind of contradiction construed within this as well. If we were to take the suggestion of Mr. Ishiba in regards to how he would like to see the amendment of Article 9 to be put forward, it would not be possible to gain the agreement of the Komeito party in this process as well. Therefore, this would mean if we were to go with his proposal from the beginning, it would be difficult to expect to achieve a 2/3 majority within the Diet as well. Therefore, the current proposal is to look at, well, there are, of course, various interpretations even now regarding the existence of the self-defense forces and their constitutionality. The suggestion is to include text which would clearly mean that there is no room for anybody to say that they are indeed against the Constitution, to make sure that this is clearly included.
石破さんたちが苦労してまとめた自民党野党時代の、2012年の自民党の案の中にはそういった問題をきれいに解決した上での提案が書かれていますが、今申し上げたようにその中にはフルの国連憲章51条の、集団的自衛権も含む内容になっています。しかしその提案をした途端におそらく公明党を含めてかなりの反発が出るし、国民の理解も必ずしも過半数得られるかどうか分からなくなります。したがって石破さんのお考えを入れて具体的な自民党の改正案をまとめることは難しいと私は思っております。
Of course, if we look at the efforts by Mr. Ishiba and others at the time when the LDP was in the opposition and put forward its overall draft for the amended constitution in the year 2012, the suggestion at that time to completely redo Article 9 of the Constitution really resolved in a very clear way this issue or this contradiction of which he speaks. However, and this also looks at, for example, the issue of collective self-defense as defined within the United Nations Charter as well. However, if we were to go forward with a proposal for an amendment, including this proposal or as according to the draft put forward by Mr. Ishiba, this would clearly be opposed by Komeito and by other political parties as well. It would not only this, but it would be likely very difficult to achieve or gain the understanding of the people of Japan as well. Therefore, while respecting the thoughts or the proposal of Mr. Ishiba, the current LDP proposal is not able to incorporate this suggestion.
Do you need to follow on that, Elizabeth? Is that okay? Okay, Jake? Siegfried next. And oh yeah, Jimbo.
Hi, Jake Adelstein with the Daily Beast. A simple question. The LDP still says that in their new constitution, they want to make the emperor the head of state, someone that I'm sure we both clearly respect. Yet the emperor said last year on August 8th that in order to preserve peace and democracy, the current constitution is something that must be protected. And it seems to imply that it must be protected from you and the LDP. So is there any contradiction between making the emperor head of state and not respecting his wishes?
デイリービーストの記者です。アデルシンと申します。シンプルな質問なんですけれども、自民党はその中で天皇陛下を国家元首としてするということを提言されていると思うんですけれども、昨年の8月8日の天皇陛下のご発言の中では、その平和、そして平和を維持するためには今の憲法を守らなければいけないというようなご発言もありました。でそれは自民党から守れなければいけないという解釈もできると思うんですけれども、その天皇陛下の昨年の発言、そして今の提案の矛盾というようなものはあるというふうに解釈されますでしょうか。
今度の単位の法案のことですか。
とまでは言ってないんですけど、天皇陛下が今の憲法を守れなければいけないというようなご発言を。
今の憲法上は天皇の地位は日本国民統合の象徴であるということによって象徴天皇ということが憲法で明文上書かれています。それに天皇陛下に原始的な機能、日本国を代表する公的な立場というものもあるのも事実ですけれども、しかしそれをあえて憲法の条文に変えて明文化することが必要かどうかという議論は 自民党の中でもありましたけれども、それは多分多くの国民のあるいは他の政党の理解を得るには遠いんじゃないかと、こういう判断をして憲法改正の項目には現在のところ考えておりません。ただ憲法草案12年草案では厳守という提案になっております。
So in regards to the position or the role of the emperor in the current constitution, it is of course set out to be a symbolic role. And looking at whether there are indeed of course suggestions or proposals to change this to having full functions of a head of state or to represent the country of Japan. However, there is still debate within the Liberal Democratic Party as well about whether changing and including this clearly or clearly changing it to make him the official head of state is necessary or not. This debate is still going on, and I believe that it would also be a point which would be difficult to gain the agreement of many of the people of Japan and also of other political parties as well. Therefore, for this reason, while it was included in the LDP's 2012 draft, we are not currently considering it within the proposals we are making at the moment.
Siegfried. And Jimbo's next.
Siegfried, little freelancer from Germany. If the paragraph 9 will be changed, and then in a way Mr. Abe wants to do, then I think the self-defense force, they are still self-defense forces after the change. They have the same limitations like now. So why then to change the constitution in this way if there is no really change?
今の安倍総理の提案の中でその憲法9条を、自衛隊として、明記するということです。実態としてそれで変化がないということも言えると思うんですけれども、実態としてそれが変わらないのであればなぜその改憲というものは必要でしょうか。
そうですね。おっしゃる通り自衛隊の実態は変わらない。
Well, of course, as you say, the nature of the self-defense force itself would not change.
政府の自衛隊の存在についても合憲という解釈も変わりはない。
And the interpretation of the government that the existence of the self-defense force is or does go according to the Constitution also would not change.
自衛隊の果たす役割や機能も平和安保法制で整えた以上のものではない。
And the role and functions of the self-defense force would not exceed what is currently determined amongst the recently passed peace and security bills.
したがって緊急性があるかとか、法的な必要性があっての改正かと言われるとそれはありません。
Therefore, if we were to ask whether it is indeed urgently necessary or legally necessary, this is not the case. しかし、日本の国の防衛の実力組織であることに、ことが自衛隊そういう役割を果たしている自衛隊が憲法にないことこそ異常なことです。 However, the very fact that the self-defense forces which do fulfill the role of defending the country of Japan are not included within the current constitution, that in itself is a strange situation.
そして自衛隊は単なる国防のための実力組織という以上に日本の平和愛国の象徴であり、その祈りを、国民の祈りをこの自衛隊は背負っているものと私は思います。
And the self-defense forces, while they do, of course, serve the function of, the self-defense force of Japan, beyond this, they are also a symbol of the peace which has been upheld by Japan as well. And I believe they bear the prayer of the Japanese people in this regard.
そういう自衛隊の存在の意義を含めて、国民誰一人違憲であると言えない状況を作って自衛隊を憲法に明記することは私は憲法改正において大いに意義のあることだと考えます。
And therefore, looking at the significance and the meaning of the self-defense forces, and through constitutional amendment being able to create a situation where nobody could claim that the existence of the self-defense force is unconstitutional, to make sure that this is not something that would be questioned anymore, this in itself has great meaning.
それに緊急性がないとは申し上げましたけども、 先ほど冒頭に、ランガンさん、ピーター・ランガンさんからお話があったように、今、日本は世界の中で一番危険な火薬庫に隣接しています。北朝鮮、その他尖閣諸島をめぐる中国のいろいろな動き、こういったことを考えると、日本の平和と安全を守り、極東の安全を守り、平和を守り、それはひいては世界の平和を守ることにつながる大事な役割をしている自衛隊の存在を明確に合憲として憲法に位置づけることの意義は、世界にとっても私は明確な意思表示の発信になると思います。
And while I did previously mention that there is no urgency for this in regards to the role of the self-defense forces, but as mentioned by Peter Langen in the introduction, Japan is situated in one of the most dangerous parts of the world. It is neighboring the very dangerous country of North Korea. There is also the situation of China's recent moves related to the Senkaku Islands. So when we consider the role that the self-defense force is fulfilling in regards to preserving the peace and security of Japan, but also of Northeast Asia and indeed of the entire world, the significance or the existence of the self-defense force and their important role to make this clear in the Constitution would be something of importance not only for Japan, but also an important message to share with the international community.
Jimbo, I'm sorry, but we've strict orders 4:30. Very quick, Japanese, please.
すみません、メディアニュースの順坊です。短くもう1点だけ、安岡議員は、自民党の憲法改正推進本部長でおられるわけですけれども、安倍総裁、安倍首相、あるいは自民党の安倍総裁があのような形で、1項、2項を残してうんぬんというようなことを憲法検議に言われた、あの時の真意はですね、安岡議員ご自身は、あるいは本部長ご自身は、あれは一体どういう意味で言ったんだと、1項、2項を残して、自衛隊を加えるというのは、それはどういう意味で言ったのかというのは、我々言葉しかまだ聞いてないものですから、それをお話をされたかどうか、あるいはもしされていないとすれば、されているとすればどう聞いたのか、されていないとすればどのように理解されているのか、それだけ1点だけお願いします。
はい。I have a very brief question in regards to if you, if you have had direct discussions with Mr. Abe in regards to his suggestion for maintaining the first two paragraphs of Article 9 and adding the third, but if you have talked with him directly about this, if so, how, and if you can share some more about this.
実際、安倍さんからそういう話を事前に聞いていたわけじゃないので、私としては非常にびっくりしました。我々の従来の9条の改正案からすると、そういう発想はなかったので、非常にびっくりはしましたが、先ほども冒頭から申し上げたとおり、具体的などの憲法の条章をどのように変えるかと、極めて鮮明で明確なご提案でした。そういう提案もあるんだと、なるほどと思って私は特進しました。でそれで憲法改正推進本部長としては、総裁の意向をしっかり受け止めて、これをやっぱり憲法改正の第1回目の投票の主要なテーマとして皆さんでまとめ上げていくことが大切だなと思った次第です。
So I had not heard directly from Mr. Abe before he made this or sent this message or proposal. I had not heard from him about this beforehand, so I was indeed very surprised when he made this statement. This was not an idea which we had considered in putting forward our proposals and so on, so it was very surprising at the time. However, as I mentioned, looking at the need to have a concrete proposal in regards to what should be changed and in what way, and to clearly put this forward, I really felt that, his proposal is really fitting with this very closely. So as the chair of the Constitutional Reform Promotion Headquarters within the LDP, I hope that we'll take on this wish or this message from Mr. Abe as well and use this as the important issue for the first constitutional amendment from now.
Okay, my last task today is to give Mr. Yasuoka a one-year honorary membership of the FCCJ. So, and thank you very much, and thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you very much.